So let me tell you what we're going to learn today. This is a sicha, a talk, an address, a shiur that was presented by the Lubavitcher Rebbe on the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, Shabbos Chazon, Tovshin Mem Bais and Tovshin Mem Daled. That's the summer of 1982 and 1984. During his Farbrengen on Shabbos Chazon, which is of course the Shabbos right before Tisha B'Av, it's called Shabbos Chazon, literally because then we read the Haftarah of Yeshayahu, our Navi Yeshaya. The first chapter begins with the words Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amoitz asher chazal Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. This is the vision of the prophet Yeshaya, the son of Amoitz, that which he saw about the pending future of Judah and Yerushalayim. Yeshaya Hanavi lived more than a century before the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, around 150 years. But he saw what you would call the beginning of the end. He saw the moral downfall. He saw, as he writes in the first chapter, Eicha hoisa lezoina kirya ne'emana tzedek yalin ba v'atem eratzchim. How did such a loyal city become so promiscuous and corrupt? A place where justice would lodge is now filled with murderers. And similar, very potent, loaded words that Yeshaya Hanavi says in this week's Haftarah, which we always read on Shabbos Devarim, Parshas Devarim, the week before Tisha B'Av. This sicha of the Rebbe was said on Shabbos Chazon, on the Shabbos, as I said, 82 and 84, 1982, 84, and 84. And it's published in Likkutei Sichos, volume 29, page 18, Sicha Shabbos Chazon. It's in Yiddish, which was the language in which he communicated, and many of the talks are transcribed in Yiddish. So those of you who know Yiddish, that's great, and those of you who don't know Yiddish, I'll translate. Aleph. Es is Yadua was Reb Hillel Paritscher brengt b'shem harav mi Barditchov nishmasei begins in Miroimim. As Shabbos Chazon is from Loshen Mechze, the Hainu as in dem Shabbos Baweisman, l'kol echad v'echad hamikdash de la'asid meirachek. Reb Hillel of Paritch was one of the great disciples of the Baal HaTanya, the Alter Rebbe, and then his son, the Mittler Rebbe, and his son-in-law, the grandson of the Baal HaTanya, the Tzemach Tzedek. Reb Hillel Paritscher passed away, as he says in footnote 2, Yud Aleph Menachem Av Tafresh Chav Daled. His yahrzeit is the 11th of Av. Tafresh Chav Daled would be 1864. He was one of the great Gaonim in Russia. He was an Av Bezdin in a few Kehillas. And Reb Hillel of Paritscher also wrote quite a few Svarim. In fact, if you remember last summer, during this period, we learned a long Maimer of Reb Hillel, a fascinating Maimer. You remember? I'm sure some of you remember about the entire process of the Jewish calendar, how it works all the way from Pesach throughout the calendar. What is the calendar trying to create within the Jewish psyche? And Reb Hillel discusses there at length the 3 weeks known as the 3 weeks of grief, Tlasa de Puranissa, followed by the 7 weeks of comfort and consolation after Tisha B'Av from Shabbos Nachamu, from next Shabbos. Fascinating Maimer, extraordinary. And in fact, we're soon going to publish it. Probably the next month, it's going to be published in Israel. The shiurim that we gave on that Maimer. Thanks, Rabbi Zriel. And that's going to be exciting, Be'ezer Hashem. So, Reb Hillel has a Maimer. We actually learned this Maimer also last year. It's a short Maimer. And Reb Hillel says that the Barditchov, Reb Levi Yitzchak of Barditchov, who's well known in the Jewish world as the great Oyev Yisrael, the lover of Israel, he was one of the greatest students of the Maggid of Mezrich. And the holy Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchov was also a Rav in many cities, including the last one, which was Barditchov in Ukraine, which was a big community, until his passing in Tishrei, I think, Tovkuf Ayin, 1809. Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchov said, you know why this Shabbos is called Shabbos Chazon? Chazon comes from the word mechze, vision. Literally, it's because the Haftarah begins with the words Chazon Yeshayahu, the vision of Yeshayahu. That's why it's called Shabbos Chazon. Every Shabbos we say a Haftarah, but it doesn't usually begin with the word Chazon. This one begins with Chazon. Says the Barditchov, the reason is because in this Shabbos, this is a special Shabbos. This coming Shabbos, Shabbos Chazon, is a Shabbos when every Jew is showing the future Beis Hamikdash, the third Beis Hamikdash from a distance. This is Reb Hillel quoting Reb Levi Yitzchak of Barditchov. Says the Lubavitcher Rebbe, says the Ein Inyan Yoytze Midei Pshute. The time of the Shabbos ruft sich Shabbos Chazon is al Shem Hafteire. Hey, so das ist der Shabbos welches Samach v'shayach l'Tisha B'Av. Sagt man die Rebbe der Hafteire. Chazon Yeshayahu, the letzte von der Gimel der Puranis. Muvan, as was nannte der Shabbos is to Tisha B'Av, als Harber is der Inyan HaPuranisa, bis as b'shas der Shabbos is Erev Tisha B'Av. Oder Tisha B'Av Gufa is Afal Piyaz in Shabbos Tornit Zayin. Shabbos Tornit Zayin ken Avelis, seine Befranin im Lekamadei is in Yane Tisha B'Av in Dvarim Shebetzina. On a literal level, everything in Torah begins on an Inyan, literal level. Ein Inyan Yotze Midei Pshute. It's called Shbbos Chazon not because we see the Beis Hamikdash. It's called Shbbos Chazon because the Haftarah, as I mentioned earlier, it's the Haftarah of Chazon Yeshayahu, which is the last one of the three unique Haftarahs that we read during the Shabbosim of the 3 weeks. And all of them deal with prophecies that speak about the future destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Now we understand, the closer the Shabbos is to Tisha B'Av, which means this Shabbos right before Tisha B'Av, the harsher, the stronger is the Puranius, the rebuke or the chastisement or the harsh words of the prophet about the destruction because it's getting closer to Tisha B'Av. To the point that in Halacha, if Shabbos is right before Tisha B'Av, it's Erev Tisha B'Av or Tisha B'Av. So even though Shabbos there's no mourning, and of course we don't fast and do the other things we do on Tisha B'Av, but according to many opinions, there are still certain things you don't do on that Shabbos privately, in the privacy of your home, because of Tisha B'Av. So this means that the mourning of the 3 weeks, it progresses, it advances. First week, then you have the second week, then you have the 9 days. The last era, you have the week in which Tisha B'Av comes out, the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. For them is verstandig euch leidiges. Das was man weiß, bei Shabbos Chazon, der Mikdash de la Asid, to live sein smiches v'shaychus at Tisha B'Av. He says, B'yeser says, B'yeser reis in akviyas, when Tisha B'Av is chol b'Shabbos, k'may b'shana zu, mervi das is in andere kviyasin, when Shabbos Chazon is chol nit b'Tisha B'Av atzmai. This also means, the other way, that when the Hillel says from the Barditchov of Barditchov, that on Shabbos Chazon, one is given the opportunity to have a vision of the future Beis Hamikdash, because this is the Shabbos right before Tisha B'Av. Of course, it would be even more emphasized when Tisha B'Av is on Shabbos itself, like that year, this year when the sicha was published. That year the sicha was published, Shabbos was on Tisha B'Av. That was Tovshin Mem Hey, 1985, when it was published. Even more than in other years when Shabbos Chazon is not Tisha B'Av. It's just a parenthetical note about the unique connection of the Vart of Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchov to that particular year. But of course, every Shabbos Chazon, whether it's Tisha B'Av or not Tisha B'Av, Shabbos before Tisha B'Av or Erev Tisha B'Av or Tisha B'Av, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditchov tells us that there is a special opportunity to have a vision of the third Beis Hamikdash. Now, what exactly does this mean? Let's continue inside Seif Bais. Those was men beweist. Shabbos Chazon the Mikdash de la Asid, afal piyas nit jeder eine zetes begolli. Und der Barditchov sagt doch nicht, dass man beweist das bloß zu Tzadikim. Und avada nicht nur le Tzadikim g'doilem. Nor marin le kol echad ve'echad am Mikdash de la Asid. When he says that on Shabbos Chazon, every Jew is showing the Beis Hamikdash, what does that even mean? Not everybody sees the Beis Hamikdash. He says, if the Barditchov would say there are tzaddikim or tzaddikim gedolim, special, righteous, holy people, okay, he doesn't say that. He says, marin lekol echad va'achas, every single Jew. What do you mean you show them? You show it to me, I don't see it. I'm included in the group that doesn't see it in a revealed way. So what does this mean? He could say, tzaddikim are showing the Beis Hamikdash. They have some type of spiritual vision. On a good day, they also have some spiritual insights that maybe other people don't have. Their antennas are up. But here he says it's l'kol echad ve'echad. Is the pirush derfun yeshleima b'pashtas. The meaning, says the Rebbe, you could say is quite literal. Al derech v'di Gemara sagt if the reit von Daniel. V'ra'isi ani Daniel levadi asamara v'anoshim asher hayu imi lo yirau asamara aval charad g'doyle nafla aleim vayivarchu behechabe. The Gemara in Maseches Megillah Daf Gimel quotes the pasuk in Daniel. We learned this Gemara together. Daniel Perik Yud, where he says, I, Daniel, saw a vision. The people with me did not see it, but they were overtaken by dread and they ran away to hide. Asks the Gemara, if they didn't see it, why were they afraid? Why were they overwhelmed? The Gemara answers, they may have not seen it, but their mazel has seen it. What does this mean, das heißt? Es ist nicht der Pshat, dass da Anoshim imi seine verzittert geworden von dem, was Daniel hat sie gegeben, der Mada. Nur der Sibbe ist gewesen in dem, was Mazlayu Chazon. Und Chazon ha-Mazel beäufen, als der Fun ist Charad da G'dayla Nafla Aleim, wie sie seinen, finden sich auf Dalamata. What the Gemara is saying is not that they became overwhelmed from fear and dread because they saw that Daniel was affected. And sometimes when you see somebody else shocked and overwhelmed and startled, it startles you as well. That's not what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying they did not see it, but their own mazel saw it. Every person has what's called mazlayhu. There is your conscious, and if you wish, there is your superconscious, subconscious. Let's call it superconscious. In fact, what does the word mazel mean? The word mazel comes from the word mazel, like nozel. What's nozel? A liquid that flows, a beverage that flows, a flow of energy is nozel. V'noizlim min Levana, the Tanakh says. They flow from Lebanon. Mazel is a source of flow. It's a source of energy. It's a source from which energy comes. That's called mazel. So when you say mazlayu chazi, what's the mazel? He brings in 9. You see footnote 9. Bepirish Rashi Daniel mazaloi sheberakia. Your mazel in heaven. Or Bepirish Rashi Megillah Daf Gimel, Sar shall kol adam lamayla. The mazel is your sar, like your angel, your spiritual guardian above. Mazel sheberakia is connected to the 12 constellations, the zodiac. That's connected to every month. Like this month is the month of Av, is the zodiac of Aryeh, right? Leo, the lion. You have Tammuz, the crab, Gemini, etc. We learned it in Rambam recently. And the reason they called it mazel is because they felt that many felt that this is like a source of influence on those, on the creatures down here below. That's where the word mazel came, like he has good mazel, she has good mazel, Mazel tov, a good mazel, good luck. Mazel. You say, this guy has mazel. The famous jokes about Yiddish mazel, Midgayish mazel, but it's not for now. So, what's that your mazel sees? Your mazel sees means a person is made up of different layers. There are the layers of self that I'm conscious of, that I'm aware of, that I'm cognizant of. And on that level, I could say I didn't experience anything. But then there is a mazel level, which call it maybe something deeper. It actually says your sar lamayla, meaning your spiritual counterpart. Your origin in a different plane, or your superconscious self. It's also a self, but it's not processed in a conscious way. And that can see things and experience things and perceive things, and it can affect you. These people were affected. It's not that they weren't affected. They were affected. They felt scared, but they didn't know why they feel scared, because the vision was not processed internally in a conscious way. By Daniel, he had the vessels to be able to contain the vision within his kalim, within his conscious brain. They did not, but it doesn't mean they did not see it. They just saw it on a different plane, in a different place. And we know this in our lives. We can sometimes perceive things on a superconscious level, and it may take years and years to process, both in the negative and in the positive. Right? How many things do we absorb as little children, but not in a conscious way? These are messages that we're not even aware that we carry, stories that we carry in our brains, and they affect our neural pathways. They affect our attitudes. They affect our sensations, our emotions. They certainly affect our perspectives, our paradigms, which affect our emotions. And sometimes my entire life is governed and dictated by a certain narrative, by a certain approach, by a certain experience, which I never even processed consciously. Wow. That's big stuff. And the beginning of healing is to identify what my mazel is believing, what got absorbed into my mazel. So this is not just, mystical, strange, heavenly stuff. This is very real. This happens, many say there's much more in your mazel than in your conscious self. The superconscious has much more information and data stored than your conscious self. Your conscious self is just a very filtered, restricted space where the conscious brain, filters most of the things gets filtered out, and only a little bit trickles down to your conscious brain. So this, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, may be the meaning. Yesh loymar in what the Barditchov says. Al derech says moving binyanenu. As the Beis Hamikdash the last by Shabbos Chazon is nit bloß an Inyan was es shaykh zu tzadikim und zeder zelenas. Oder nachme sein nes megalo zu Sharbnei Yisrael. Nor eich beloschen Chazal hanal, loschen teure hanal. Marin der loschen akodesh von Chazon. Marin lekol echad ve echad. Man beweist, dass jeden einen Marim le Mazlayu von seiner Schamme und das peilt auf dem Adam bis euch auf sein Gouverneur für Bahamas. According to this, we can explain that when the Barditchov speaks about the vision of the Beis Hamikdash and Shabbos Chazon, it's not just something that relates to tzaddikim, and they share it with other people. And you may get inspired by their inspiration, or they reveal it to other people, but it's basically their thing. The Barditchov is saying something else. Marin, Chazon, in Hebrew is Marin. Chazon is one word of mechazah va'ata sechazah, and the normal word in Lashon Kodesh is Marin, re'iyah, seeing. So he says Marin, the Chazon is, this vision is l'kol echad ve'echad. Every single Jew individually, his or her mazel, the mazel of their neshama, sees the third Beis Hamikdash. And this has an impact on the person, not just on the person above, but also on the person within the body, the person's body and the person's animal soul. He brings in footnote 10 something very interesting. K'mavur b'kama mekaymas, b'negeya habaskel shalamayla, sha'mazel d'neshama shemeya v'nimshach mizeh l'neshama beguf, uregam sefer chredim b'chsimas ha-sefer. The word from the Baal Shem Tov, it says that every day a baskel goes out from Har Chayrev, from Mount Chayrev, and summons the Jewish people to Torah. And the Baal Shem Tov said, what's the point of a voice coming out of a mountain when nobody hears it? And the Baal Shem Tov said, your mazel does hear it. And that's the reason that sometimes in the middle of the day you have a Hirur Tshuva and you don't know where it came from. Sometimes a person in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, feels a surge of inspiration. Nothing extraordinary happened in their life. Why? The Baal Shem Tov said, because your mazel hears the baskel, and sometimes that mazel sends down, sends a trickle. There's a trickle of data that comes into your conscious self, and from this, you have a P'sei Seidus in the middle of the day. So the next time you have a P'sei Seidus in the middle of the day, the Baal Shem Tov says you should know your mazel heard the baskel, and now there's more communication between your mazel and your conscious self. Gimel. Was ist der Teuchen betachlis und weiß in der Mikdash der Lasid? So he explained that this is connected to the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. He explained that it's connected to every Jew on a mazel level. But now let's discuss, what is this? What is this vision of the Beis Hamikdash? What's the point? I mean, it's a nice idea. Beis Hamikdash is shown. What's the theme behind it? Is the Barditchov Mevayim et HaMashal. The Behillel in that Maimer, he doesn't just quote this line from the Barditchov. He quotes a whole parable. A story that the Barditchov said in order to explain it. Let's hear the mashal. A Vater, was hat aufgenäht a teiren Malbusch für sein Kind. Und der Kind hat dem Begget zerrissen, lekame kreuen. Hat ihm der Vater gemacht a zweiten Levush, aber der Kind hat euch dem zweiten Begget zerrissen. Hat der Vater aufgenäht für ein Kind a dritten Levush, aber hat es ihm nicht gegeben anzutan. Nor leprakim, rechökim, jeduyim. Beweist ihm dem Levush, sagen dich der Bais, wenn wird sich finden bei der Chayasher, wird es ihm geben anzutan. Und durch dem ist ihm der Vater margil zu gehen bei der Chayasher. Bis das wird beim Kind kemai Teva, und dann gibt der Vater dem Levush zu sein Kind, soll ihm antan und tragen. Und moven beteure Hanal, das ist ein Maschel auf die zwei Bate Mikdash, welche sind ein Charov geworden, und den Beis Hamikdash, Bais der Mikdash der Lasid. There was a father who had a beautiful, exquisite, most expensive cloak and garment woven for his child. The child who didn't appreciate the garment took it, and in a moment of weakness, he ripped it up. He destroyed the entire garment. What does Tati do? He has a second garment made for him. The most exquisite tailors, most beautiful garment. The child takes the second garment, rips it up again, it's destroyed. The father prepares a third cloak for the child. But this time, he doesn't give it to him. Rather, there are certain moments where he shows him the garment. And he says, when you will behave in an appropriate way, I'm going to give it to you. And this helps the child become disciplined to follow the right path in life until this behavior becomes like second nature, because habit creates nature. And then the father gives the gift, this beautiful, exquisite garment to the child that he can actually wear and don it and wear it and have it as his own. This is the metaphor. What's the message? The first garment and the second garment are a parable for the two Batei Mikdash. Both were torn up by the child and therefore they were destroyed. Hashem, the Father, has a third garment woven that he doesn't give. He shows it. Shabbos Chazon, he shows the garment, which inspires the child to mend his or her ways until he will or she will ultimately get that garment. That's the metaphor. And as he says in footnote 13, that some of the concepts of the metaphor are rooted perhaps in Zohar. He says, Ulai Zewa Yesod La Mashal Darav Me Barditchov. Es ist Yadua, as alle Meshalom von Teiras Emes, seinen Meduyik b'chol ha'pratim. Aber Meile, wenn alles der Mashal hat gesagt, Rav Me Barditchov, is moving as the Mashal b'diyik masam zum Nimshal. Whenever there's a parable, a mashal in Torah, it's not stam, entertainment purposes, let's throw in a joke. That's not what it is. Torah is Torah's emes. We say it every day. We say in the brachas of Torah, Asher nosan lanu, Torah's emes. V'chayei olam natum. It's Torah's, what's Torah's emes? Every nekuda of Torah is emes. It's truth. That's powerful. If it's Torah, it's emes. If it's not emes, it's not Torah. There's no Torah that's not emes. If so, a metaphor in Torah, a parable in Torah, an illustration in Torah, an allegory in Torah is also emes. And that means it's precise, it's meticulous. It's not stam zugeklept avant savant, I need a hakaraina story, here's a good mashal. No, the mashal has to really fit the nimshal like a hand in the glove. They work together because it's a true mashal. It really brings out the point. This mashal was not just said by some entertainer, it was said by the Barditchov Rav Barditchov. So he says the mashal is b'diuk. It's precise. And here is the question. If you would hear this word from the Barditchov, and I would ask you to give a mashal for this, what's the mashal you would give? Darf man lefi zeh verstehen? Die Batei Mikdashes ist doch Inyanam gewesen hat dir es qua Bais nicht beöffnen Arei. Wie sie es gewesen der Mishkan, was auf ihm steht, ve Eyem ist Halich beoil über Mishkan. Ist was sagte der auf der Mashal von Alavush, was Mohusa ist, ki Lavush tachlife, a Sachav zu beiten, und zum Laschalei Bolsa ist gewesen an Nes und nach Narles Mann Mugbel. Ube Jeise Zarechia. Man kann doch demselben Inyen Mamash herausbringen durch ein Mashal mit durch Beis Hamikdash von Bais. Geschmack a question. The a garment by definition is exposable. It's made to constantly change. Even if you keep the same garment for many years, a shirt, you change it. There's a pasuk katilam, ki levush tachlifim v'yachleifu. Even when the Rebbe wants to say that a garment is something you constantly change, he brings a pasuk for this also. Everything is rooted in Torah. It's the blueprint of the world. Ki levush tachlifim v'yachleifu. A levush you change. It gets dirty. It gets old. It shreds. It doesn't have the best odor, the best aroma. A lavush is something by definition that even if you keep it in your closet for many years, like some people do, but it's something that you're constantly changing. The Beis Hamikdash, what was the focus and the theme of the Beis Hamikdash? It was a Bais kva. It was a permanent, fixed place for the Shechina. Unlike the Mishkan was a temporary, mobile sanctuary. And therefore it moved from one place to another place, as he brings in 17 from the Rambam and Beis Hamikdash, that V'haya lefi shah. It was a temporary dwelling place for the divine. On the pasuk says about the Mishkan, V'eya misalach ba'oyel. It's like a tent. You pitch a tent and then you pitch the tent somewhere else. The Beis Hamikdash, in contrast, was a Bais kavua. Its point was fixed, and each one was there for hundreds and hundreds of years. The first for 410 years, the second for 420 years. So why would Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchov use the metaphor of a garment to describe the Beis Hamikdash? Now, he says, in the midbar, it says, Simlascha loy bolsa, your shirt never decomposed, it never became old. He says that was a miracle, and it was only for those 40 years. After that, shirts get ruined, you have to change your shirt. Yes, in the midbar, there was something unique about the clothes, that they remained on them for 40 years and they were good. But that's unique. It's not the normal way of a lavush. The question is much more. Rabbi YY Jacobson could have given the same exact metaphor about a home. Just say there was a father and he built this most beautiful, exquisite, wonderful, stupendous home for his child. Child comes into the home, destroys it, makes a churva. He builds him a second, he renovates the home, or he builds him another home once again. He puts it on fire, he destroys it. He ruins the whole mansion. The father builds him a third home and says, well, once in a while I'll give you a tour to trigger your interest and curiosity, arouse your yearning, and then you'll behave and you'll get the house. A beautiful marshal. A beautiful marshal that fits the nimshal like a hand in a glove. But Barditchov doesn't say that. He finds a marshal of a levush, a garment, which by definition is of a completely different function than a home. Nachman. Question is even more. The iker mechuvim from marshal is dach l'chayre as geben dik the Beis Hamikdash alava bezel menem nit charav machen. Ezel zayin ilu zachu kayim la'ad bekiyum nitzchi. Wie passt of them the marshal von a levush, was is an aray dike zach, the hepech von an inyan nitzchi. Furthermore, the whole point of the metaphor is that when Hashem gave the first and second Beis Hamikdash, he didn't want it should be destroyed. He wanted that the Jewish people should cherish it and it should endure for eternity. So why are you giving the mashal that a father gave his son a garment? When you give your son a garment, even if it's a beautiful garment, your point is not that this garment should be timeless and eternal. By definition, it's something that it's there for a year, 2 years, 3 years, especially if the child is growing. It anyway you have to change it. But essentially, you're giving a mashal of something that actually brings out the opposite point. The first question is, the mashal and the nimshal are not consistent. It's more than that, they're opposites. You're trying to bring out that Hashem was disappointed. He wanted the child to hold on to this Beis Hamikdash and not allow it to be destroyed, not put it on fire. The mashal, the father gives a lavush, what, it should remain forever? No. He was upset that the child tore it immediately. Or after 410 years in the nimshal, it wasn't immediately. But the point of a lavush is that you're not giving something for eternity. As Chachin Bais is da maile legabe levush the mitvah said is a davar kavu tmidi is a bereich for an maile in levush welches nitoin Bais benitten de dan shaykh is der pulle von ben es gehen bei der chayosh is nege beike den ingen von der Beis Hamikdash keilech Beis Hamikdash the last is bedugmas levush und nit azay das was is a Bais. You have to say that even though a home is obviously superior to a garment, and if you need any proof, you could just look at the difference of the price between the home and the garment, which is of course the different effort that's put into making a garment or building a home, true. And the home is a fixed, perpetual place. You don't buy a house every year or every 6 months. Maybe some people do, but the regular person, you buy a house and you sometimes live there your whole life, or at least you live there for many decades. It's something that's kavua, it's tmidi, it's fixed, it's permanent. But apparently we see from here that there's something about a garment that is superior to a home. And this is something that a home lacks. And here, when the Yitzchak of Barditchov is trying to bring out, influencing the child to live life according to the appropriate path, derech hayashar, What is relevant here is that the Beis Hamikdash is compared to a garment, not to a home. This is not stam, he chose a mashal. In the theme that he's trying to bring out, that the father is showing the garment, showing the Beis Hamikdash to the child to inspire him or her to be able to cherish it and embrace it and live their life in the most appropriate, harmonious, joyous, truest fashion, derech hayosher. What's relevant is the Beis Hamikdash portrayed as a garment, whether garment 1, garment 2, or garment 3, the third Beis Hamikdash. V'yesh loymar dem bir bazeh. Perhaps the explanation can be explained as follows. I know that there's a lot of details here until the Rebbe is building up to the main points he's going to make, but try to stay the course, because you will discover here not only the richness in the mashal of Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchov and in the nimshal, but a very powerful and fundamental idea in the whole process of life, and life as a Jew, and life as a Jew in Galus preparing for Geula. Eine von der Iker, die Kichilukam zwischen Levush und Bais ist, als a Levush ist zugepasst, leu der Mas von dem Adam Halayvish. Bei a Begge darf sein der Eirich Vereichev seiner Behesse mit Midas Arke Verach Beshaladam, nicht kürzer und nicht länger. Wie der Din ist, bin ich Bigdei Kohune, was doch sein Lechavedel Sefaris, als darf sein kefi Midas Shalakayan. One of the main differences between a garment and a home is a garment has to be suited to the size of the physique of the person who's wearing the garment. You can't just go into the store and buy a shirt any size. Yeah, buy shoes any size, pants any size, a hat any size, a jacket, a dress, a gown, whatever it is, a skirt. It needs to be measured according to the physique, to the body, to the length and the width of the person who's wearing it. It can't be too short. It can't be too long. And as always, from my perspective, you made your point. But the Rebbe says it's also halacha. The halacha is by Bigdei Kohuna. Everything has a source in Torah. What's the halacha by Bigdei Kohuna? And Bigdei Kohuna had to be lekavadul seferis. The pasuk says they had to be glorified. They were the glory of Aaron and the glory and the beauty of Aaron. The halacha is they have to be according to the size of the kohen. All the begadim. The kohen wore pants, and he wore a shirt, and he wore a gartel, a belt, an avnet, and he wore a migbas, a hat. It had to be according to the size of the kohen. That's how it was prepared. And the same is true with the kohen gadol. That's what a levush is, and that's the halacha, like he brings in 23, Psachim Daf Samachay, Rambam Klei HaMikdash. Mashenkin Bais, what about a home? When you look at a home that you want to buy, do you make sure that the home suits your height? So if you're 6 feet tall, you make sure that your home is 6 feet in height, and 2 feet in width, or 1.5 foot in the width, or 1 foot in the width. Opposite. We like larger homes, we like big homes, and even if you're living in a small home, it does not fit your size. The beauty of a home is, there's space, it's much larger than you. Chas v'shalom. The end of life, the home that is where the body lives after death, that's measured according to the size of the body. But not a home in which we're alive. Mashenkin Bayis is midasei arka v'rach be'asach greser v'midasad. Both the length and the width, and of course the height, is much larger than the size of the person living in the home. Again, I think the point is clear, but the Rebbe says, v'megefint la'halacha. Every nekuda in life, when you find it in halacha, you know that that's emes. V'megefint la'halacha. In other words, it's not stam minhag medina, minhag America, you need a big house. You megefint la'halacha. As a Bais is chayiv b'mezuzah nor dam when hat lechal apachas demas von dalar amas al dalar amas al sachmer v'midasad. You hear it, aye? The pasuk says uchsafta mal mezuzah is beisechel v'sherech. A house needs a mezuzah, but there's a shear. The house has to be dalar amas by dalar amas, 4 cubits by 4 cubits, approximately 8 feet by 8 feet, 8 feet in the length and 8 feet in the width, approximately between 6 and 8 feet. Dalar amas, 4 cubits by 4 cubits. Now, a person's length is not 8 feet, and a person's width is not 8 feet. Let's hope so. In other words, by halacha, the definition of a house. I know some of our houses are larger than 8 feet. That's not the point. But the definition of a house in halacha, which makes it obligated to have a mezuzah, is a home that is larger than the size of the human being living in the home. Unlike a lavush, you're not going to say that for your garment to be mechuyev in tzitzis, it has to be dalet amas al dalet amas, because those tzitzis are not going to be very comfortable to wear. The garment that's mechuyev in tzitzis is arba kanfas. It's a garment that fits your body. Everybody goes in to buy tzitzis and they ask for the right size, 18, 20, 24, etc. Midas adam is migefit legabe dem shir from a mikveh. The size of a person you see by a mikveh. The Gemara says in Erevin, Amma al Amma beroim gimel amas kimidas shaladam. The size of a mikveh, how did the Chachamim estimate what's the size of a mikveh? The size of a person, because your whole body has to be submerged in the mikveh. So they say it's Amma al Amma. Amma means an Amma width and an Amma length, which means approximately 1.5 feet this way and 1.5 feet this way approximately. And the height is, till the head, the height is Gimel Amas. Gimel Amas would be around 6 feet, or again 4.5 feet, between 4.5 and till the head. That's the size of a person. That's not dalet amas al dalet amas. It's much smaller than that. What do you see from here? That a home is larger than the size of a person. Von dem ist verstandig, as the shaykh is von a levush. Zum Adam hamalubish boy is a sach a proti is dicke. An nentere, wie der shaykh is von a Bais zu dem, was wohnt in ihm. Und der Fahr ist da ich an Unterschied zwischen Levush und Bais, wie viel man kann haben von sehr schade wegen dem Adam Shabbat. Wenn man guckt auf alle Levush, kann man von ihm wissen, bestimmte Pratim von dem Melubish bei. Arkai, Rachbe, Vecheitzebeze. Warum der Beged ist, Lefimi Dasse a Pratis, shall Adam, sehr dafke Kanal. Ma schenken durch Zena Bais kann man noch haben a Aschare Klolles wegen dem Einwohner von dem Bais. Sie ist a Bais von einem Ascher oder von einem Ani, Vecheitzebeze. Man kann aber von dem Bais nicht wissen und erkennen in Janim Pratim von dem Darba Bais. What does this mean in other words? A garment is individualized. It's custom made. It must suit your physique, your measurements as an individual. A home, a lot of people, they buy a home, they go into the house, they don't have to do anything. It's your home, now it becomes my home. This person is 6 feet tall, and this person is 4 feet tall, and this person is 5 feet tall, so what? A lavush has to be custom made. In other words, its connection is much more individuated. Of course, I can wear a garment of somebody else who has the same measurement, but it has to be limited to that person who's the same size like me. So he says the connection of a garment to the person who wears the garment, in contrast to the connection of a house to the person who lives in the house, is one we hear it's custom made to this person. And that's why when I'm looking at your garment, even if I'm not looking at you, there's certain things that I know about you from the garment. I know certain things about your shape. I know certain things about your size. I don't know your personality from your garments. Maybe some people can, but we're talking here on a more basic, simple level, not metala shtickes that people do. But I know certain features about your body, whether it's your length or your height or your width, etc. Why? Because the beged has to be woven according to your midah, according to your size. When I look at your home, I can have a general estimation. This is a big home. This is a small home. This person is poor. This person is rich. This person put a lot of work in their home. This person didn't put any work in the house. This house is beautiful. This house, is old. It could use some help. That you know. But I'll never know individual features of the person living there. How tall he is, how short she is, how their size, this way, that direction, that direction. How am I supposed to know that? Unless I know the person. The lavush is like, it's the hand in the glove. So from the glove, you could see the hand. A bias is not a hand in the glove. It's a place where the person lives. So I may know some general things. Again, we're not talking about the fact that today some people build a house and their whole personality they put into their house. So that's a whole other issue. And that's, certainly for the Rebbe's generation, that's a little bit of a rear development. Maybe even in the olden days, the czars in Russia, and the kings in France had that luxury. But just on a general level, from the lavush, you could see certain features of the person wearing it, not from the house. It's this understanding that opens up the vista to appreciate what's happening. Al Pize is moving the tam, for was the moshel is dafke von a levush and nit von a bias. That's why the Barditchov brought a metaphor of a garment, not a home. The Kedusha von Beis Hamikdash besteht nicht nur von ein Kedusha Klolis, das was is a bias Lashem, nor is einen Fran Chilukei Madreges in die Kedushas. Kedusha Kadoshim, Heichel, Azara, V'chuli. Es ist da Kedusha Pratis, Bechol, Chelik, und Mokim Prati von der Beis Hamikdash. Der Binyan Beis Hamikdash ist gewinn HaKoil, B'ksav, Miyad Hashem, Alai Hiskel. V'hainu as the Chelkei HaBayis, der Mokim und Midas Eirich, V'reiche, V'chuli, von jeder Chelik Shabba HaBayis, seine gewinn Mechuven und Meduyek, Behesse mit der Chilukim in der Kedusha, zwischen jeder Chelik und Mokim Prati Shabbai. Und das ist euch, I'll explain in a moment, und das ist euch, was auf dem Pasuk machen, l'shift gepalta Hashem sagen Razal, und seine Medaille b'lashainam, Beis Hamikdash shalamatan mechuven keneged Beis Hamikdash shalamayla. Ad der Beis Hamikdash, wie ist da lamata, mit die alle Chilukim in Mokim und mit des Gashmim von jeder Chelik Prati, was enthalten sich, ist mechuven und meduye keneged Beis Hamikdash shalamayla. Das altes Kineged Basame mit den Teichen und Madreges HaKdusha in jeder Chelik Prati von Ruchni ist der Beis Hamikdash Shalamayla. Und die Chilukei Darges bemokim sind nicht verbunden mit Chilukei Darges bei Bnei Yisrael. Es ist Noshem, Anashem, Mokim, was noch Akaya Nichnas v'chuli. Und in dem besteht der Yisrael Meile von Levush Lagabe Bais. Weil das, was der alle Chelke Prati Hamikdash sind gewinn Basame mit der Yekes. Mit der Chilukei Darges HaKdusha Shabam Kanal ist bedugmet zu Levush, was ist Bechol Pratov zugepasst, Lahamalubash bei. The Kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash was not one general Kedusha, a home of Hashem, and the whole house is just a uniform space of holiness where the Shechina is. That's not Pshat. The Beis Hamikdash itself was compartmentalized with many different gradations and levels of holiness. You had the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That was a unique level of holiness. You had the Heichel. That's the inner sanctuary that had a roof over it. That's where the menorah was, the shulchan was, the inner altar was. You had the outer courtyard called the Azara, etc. Many more chambers and compartments. And each part has its own individual Kedusha. Every individual place of the Beis Hamikdash has a unique level of Kedusha and also with unique requirements. This place, only the Kohen Gadol could go in once a year. This place, only Kohenim could go in. This place, Yisraelim could go in. In other words, these compartmentalizations were very serious. This is a place where even Kohenim can't go in. The Kodesh HaKadoshim, even the Kohen Gadol couldn't go in outside of Yom Kippur. Now the Beis Hamikdash was built by the architecture of the Rebbeinu Shalom. David HaMelech says, Hakol b'ksav miyad Hashem alai hiskel. Hashem, so to speak, gave me the blueprint, as he says in 33 from Divrei Hayamim Aleph. In other words, it wasn't stam, we built different sections. The different parts of the Beis Hamikdash, which includes the physical space, the length, the size, the height, the dimensions of each section of the Beis Hamikdash were consistent and built based on the unique holiness that was manifested in this place. The physical space, it's not just Hashem says, okay, the Kodesh HaKadoshim is holy, the Heichel is holy in a different way, the Azar is holy in a different way. The physical features of the Kodesh HaKadoshim were built thus that they should be able to be a keli that manifests this unique level of Kedusha. The Azara's features were different. The Heichel structure was different. And this includes which compartments were there, the length of the doors, the size of the doors, the length of the curtains, the width of the curtains, every single element that was there, how the space was set up. Exterior design and interior design, but even exterior design. Simply the dimensions were not random. It was just like, okay, let's do it this way, let's do it that way. They were all choreographed. They were all designed individually in order to be able to be the right conduit for the level of holiness that had to be manifested in that particular place. That's why he says there's a fascinating statement of Chazal in Medrash Tanchumim Mishpatim and in Zohar on the pasuk Machain l'shiftecha pa'alta Hashem that we say every morning. that the Beis Hamikdash below parallels the Beis Hamikdash above. What does this mean? What does it mean the Beis Hamikdash below parallels the Beis Hamikdash above? It means that the Beis Hamikdash below, what do we mean the Beis Hamikdash below? The Beis Hamikdash below is the Beis Hamikdash that you could take a picture of with your physical camera, which is divided into very different physical chambers and room and spaces. So the differences in the physical measurements of the physical Beis Hamikdash was parallel to the spiritual Beis Hamikdash. It sounds like a very strange concept. Can we apply this practically? He says yes. What it means is, don't look at the physical features of the Beis Hamikdash as physical features. No, each one was paralleled to a specific spiritual energy that had to be manifested through these individual sizes. And that's why every room was designed differently in terms of the size of the room, the length of the room, the width of the room, the height of the room, the type of walls of the room or no walls, the roof of the room, the curtains that were in the room, and anything that went inside the room, the interior. It was all parallel, a mirror of the Kedusha, the spiritual divine holiness that was manifested in that place. And every individual chelik in a different Kedusha. And that's why different Jews could go into different places. Because every Jew has the Kedusha that is manifested through that Jew. You have the women, and you have the men, and you have the Levim, and you have the Kohen, you have the Kohen Gadol. So you had in the Beis Hamikdash, Ezras Noshim, Ezras Anoshim, places only a Kohen could go in, a Yisrael can't go in, a Levi can't go in, places where pure people could go in, ritually impure people could go in. Everything was meticulously designed. He says that's the uniqueness of the word of a levush, legabe abayis. Because the fact that every part of the Beis Hamikdash was consistent with the unique level of holiness that was manifested through it, that represents the concept of a garment which is measured for the person to go into it. My shirt has to be made in a way that it should be able to fit me, Rabbi YY. The same is true with my pants, the same is true with my hat, the same is true with my shoes. The levush has to be a reflection of the one who is malubash in the levush. That was the uniqueness of the Beis Hamikdash. It wasn't just one home that the person could live there. No. Every part of the Beis Hamikdash was different, consistent with the Kedusha that's manifested through it. So the physical Beis Hamikdash was like the glove in which the hand fits perfectly. The divine holiness is manifested through that particular through that particular place and its unique dimensions because of a unique individualized Kedusha, not just one general Kedusha that goes into the whole house and there's no differences. Then the metaphor would be very well, then the metaphor of a home would be perfect. But we want to bring out this idea that what? That every single space in the Beis Hamikdash had a different Kedusha. And it was built physically in a way that manifested that Kedusha. And the distinct features were because of distinct levels of spiritual energy that were manifested through those features. That is expressed in the idea of a levush. That the levush has to be consistent. It's the hand and the glove. The glove must be made in a way that it fits this hand. And you can't put the glove on your foot. On your foot you put a sock, and the sock has to be consistent with this foot. And the same is true with the shirt, the same is true with the shoes. It has to be consistent with this unique part of the body. It will become even more clear soon. I want to learn one more seif. It's going to be another few minutes. Vav, and then the rest will continue in the next shiur. Afal piyas darin in meiles halavush von Beis Hamikdash gemoving event kanal Bais Rishon Bais Sheni euch bemishken. Ulay shleimar chidush. As von deswegen der Iker uftun chidush in a mashal von levush is beneged the Beis Hamikdash the last Beis Hamikdash shlishi. This quality existed in the first Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash, even in the Mishkan. The Mishkan had different rooms, different chambers, different compartments. Each one was built and designed differently. If you read the Torah, Truma, Tetzaveh, Vayakal, Pkudei, Every single detail and nuance is orchestrated, how many beams and how many curtains and where they go and what's the size, the height and the width and the length and every socket, and this is in this room and in this room, and this room we need tapestries and veils that look this way, and here we need beams, and here we need bars, and here we need these pegs. It's all connected to the Kedusha, even in the Mishkan. He says, perhaps we could say a Chiddush. It's a unique expression for the Rebbe. Ulay Yishlem a Chiddush. Usually doesn't, it's a very rare expression. That this quality of Levush is going to be even more emphasized in the third Beis Hamikdash. Why? There be it in them. Das was der Bais Dishna bei Hashem ist ein gewinn bedugmas Levush, als jeder Chelik und Prate gewinn behessen mit Dargas HaKedusha Shabbai, für Shebe Bnei Yisrael Kanal. Is nit mefurish beksuvim v'chuli, Gali v'nikir in zebe pratius. Begali is given nikir, as is abayis l'Hashem, fanande getelt l'mekaymes klalim v'chuli. Aber bei Beis Hamikdash HaShlishi wird sich oftan, as eich la'ene basar wird sein nikir v'gali de maila meyuchedes, was is bedugmas Levush. As jeder Prat von dem Middes v'chalke abayis is behessen zu der Kedusha Pratis Shabbai. V'atam baza, steht in Zohar, der Beis Hamikdash Alava Beis and gewinn Binyana Barnash. Man steht in der Beis Hamikdash de Last, Beis Hamikdash Gimel is Binyana de Kutsche Brichel. Und der Ribber in Beis Hamikdash Alava Beis, Afal Pirzen and alle Chelke Prate Hamiddes behessen mit Duyek, Miyad Havaya, mit die Kedushas Pratis, wird bald aber als Binyana und Pratovs an sich Messiachis zu Barnash, Chotschas is Miyad Havaya. Der Vater man nicht angesehen begilui in die Prate Chelke Beis Hamikdash Shalamata, wie sie seinen behessen mit die Prate Chelke Akdusha von Binyana de Kutsche Brichel Kanal. Maschegen bei Beis Hamikdash de la Aset wird bald der Bayen Atzme ist Binyana de Kutsche Brichel, weil der Ribber euch in die Prate Hamikdash Shalamata sich abspiegeln begilui die Prate Akdusha Beis Hamikdash Shalamayla, wie jeder Makke mit die Prates v'chuli von Gashmi ist, der Beis Hamikdash Atzme ist behessen mal auf die Midas Akdusha Shalamayla Shabbat. The first and second Beis Hamikdash and even the Mishkan were also like a garment. What do we mean like a garment? Every single part was different. Why was every part different? Because it's like a garment. It has to be suited to the one who's dressed up in that garment. And if it's two separate people dressed up in garments and they have different sizes, you need different garments. Every part of the Beis Hamikdash was like a garment in the sense it was built in a unique fashion with unique measurements and dimensions, which was consistent, it was suited, it was custom made for the level of Kedusha that it housed to be able to be manifested in it. And the level of Kedusha of the Jew who walked in and worked in that particular place of the Beis Hamikdash. It all has to be custom made for that level of holiness. That's true. But all these differences in the Beis Hamikdash, first and second, is not clearly in Chumash. And it wasn't revealed in a specific way. When you came to the Beis Hamikdash, what did you see? You saw there was a big home with different sections. That's what you saw. We know from Halacha. You have in Rambam Hilchas Beis Abchira, he discusses the individual Kedusha of the Kodesh HaKadoshim and the Heichal and every feature and every dimension. But when you look there, what did you see? You saw one big home. You knew it was a holy home. Kodesh HaKadoshim was off limits. Certain places were off limits. It wasn't revealed in the physical properties, the differences. By the Beis Hamikdash HaShlishi, what's going to happen is that even to the physical eye, one will be able to see that the unique quality that the Beis Hamikdash is like a garment is going to be physically perceived. That every detail of the dimensions of the third Beis Hamikdash is consistent with the sanctity in it. And it's explicit in Tanakh by the third Beis Hamikdash. He says in 42, Kahadiyuk ba'psukim de Yecheskel, Perek Mem Gimel. He discusses the vision of the Beis Hamikdash, the third one. So take a look at the words in Yecheskel, Perek Mem Gimel. Tzuras habayis, tchunasai, maitzav, mavav, eskol chukaisav, haida oisam. Tell the Jews every nuance and detail, every path, every way to go in, go out. Umefadet b'diyu katzuras v'amidu. So they say for tzuras habayis, labalatais v'shamtav bagdamas. What's the reason for this? It says in Zohar, the first two Batei Mikdash were built by people. Shlomo HaMelech, and the group that came from Bavel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and the other people who built the second Beis Hamikdash. The third Beis Hamikdash is the building of Hashem. It's Binyana de Kutshe Brichel. So in the first two Batei Mikdash, even though all of the details were orchestrated and commanded by Hashem. Hakol b'ksav miyad Hashem alai hiskel, David HaMelech says, including the individual kedusha in every place. But since the structure was a human structure, even though it was instructed by Hashem, but it was facilitated through human beings, therefore, in the physical parts of the Beis Hamikdash below, you could not see how they are a manifestation for the details of the different types of holiness. Why? Because since it was a physical structure of human beings, so therefore, in the nuances, in the details of the Beis Hamikdash below, you could not see in a revealed way how they are a manifestation, how they are consistent with the details of the different dimensions of holiness of the Beis Hamikdash Shalamayla. We know that it was so, but it was not visibly seen. And even in the Chumash or the Tanakh, what's discussed is the general Beis Hamikdash as a home for Hashem with a few general sections. So even the way in the Torah doesn't go into all of the details. The third Beis Hamikdash, since the structure, the physical structure, is Hashem's structure, so therefore, even in the details of the physical Beis Hamikdash below, they will each mirror in the most revealed and manifested way the Beis Hamikdash Shalamayla, which means the kedusha of it. How every place, every measurement, every individual dimension of every single nook and cranny in every centimeter of the physical Beis Hamikdash is really a lavush. It's really tailor-made and customized for the midah. It's a measurement for the kedusha. The physical dimensions and the physical space, you will see how it is a keli, a conduit, a lavush, which is measured lefi the midas hakdusha shaboy. There's a midah, there's a size, just like a person has a size, and that size is coming into the garment. There's a size of kedusha that's coming in, and that's the two batei mikdash, the Beis Hamikdash Shalamayla, Beis Hamikdash Shalamata. Beis Hamikdash Shalamata doesn't mean Beis Hamikdash somewhere near Mars, and Beis Hamikdash Shalamata is the Beis Hamikdash on the Temple Mount. It's a much more practical and subtle. Beis Hamikdash Shalamata means the physical Beis Hamikdash that you could photograph when it's there. The Beis Hamikdash Shalamayla means the kedusha, the divine energy that's there. Every part of the Beis Hamikdash is mechuven to the Beis Hamikdash Shalamayla. But in the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, it will be seen with the physical eye. You'll be able to see how this is a lavush. The fact that this room, this chamber, this section has these dimensions, these features, exterior and interior structure, is all really a lavush. It's just tailor-made for the kedusha that's coming through this. What's the theme behind all of this? What's the explanation behind all of this? What does this mean in a person's life? What is the connection to Shabbos Chazon? How does this inspire the child to be able to enhance and build his or her life into the life that it can be and should be? That we're going to continue tomorrow morning. Be'ezer Hashem, 7:30 Friday morning, we're going to continue this and get to the great punchlines and very powerful applications for life. Now you're wondering, where's there an application for life? We learned about a home and a lavush and features and dimensions. Stay the course and you will see, because there are ideas here which can be extremely uplifting and transformative. Okay, we could take a few questions. Let's see what's going on here, Chevra. Just want to remind you again, 10 o'clock a.m. there will be a Shir Rambam. And tonight, 8:30 p.m., we are going to have a Shir in Parshas Devarim. It's entitled, Always Find the Positive in yourself, in your child, and in everybody else. That's tonight, 8:30. I hope to see you right here on the yeshiva.net. Tomorrow morning, 7:30, we continue this Shir. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, Be'ezer Hashem, we have the class in Rambam. Okay, question. The Rebbe asks why the mashal of a garment which is disposable, whereas the Beis Hamikdash was a permanent structure. But as we saw, unfortunately, both Batei Mikdash were also disposed of. That's true. But the point is, Hashem is regretting the fact that it was disposed of, because he wanted it should be something permanent. But in the mashal, he gives him something that is by definition disposable. That's the issue. And you can give the same mashal from the house, because it's much better, it's much more accurate. Hashem, the father, gave them a house, and the kid destroyed the house. Was he supposed to destroy the house? No, a house is not disposable, don't destroy it. And he destroyed it. That's the whole point of the Nimshal. Hashem gave us a home, not a garment, and yet we destroyed it. That was the question. Everybody have a beautiful day. See you Be'ezer Hashem at 10. Thank you.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.